Welcome back to the City Current Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're always honored to bring you inspiring stories of individuals and organizations making a difference and powering the good in our community. And we're talking about CASA, working with court-appointed special advocates for children. We are joined by Emily Layton. She's the executive director of Williamson County CASA. How are you doing, Emily?
I'm so good, Jeremy. How are you?
Doing very well. So when you talk about CASA, I kind of shared the acronym, but when you talk about court-appointed special advocates for children, give us a little bit of context. Let's start with some history, and then we'll talk about all the good you do to power the good. So give us some history for CASA.
Sure. So CASA is a national organization, and it actually started in the Seattle area. And what was happening is there was a juvenile court judge who was hearing cases of abuse and neglect, and he kind of looked around the courtroom and had this moment where he realized nobody was speaking on behalf of the child. The child was the only one who didn't have a voice in court. Mom or dad or whoever the offender was had a voice, but somehow the child didn't have a voice in court. So that was the inspiration for the concept of how do we get voices for children in the courtroom. And so he thought to himself, I bet I could find some volunteers who'd be willing to do this. And then it grew from there. And so as it stands now, there's about 95,000 advocates across the United States. And the program is in 49 of the 50 states in the US. And this all started with a concept in the mid 70s and has grown from there.
Talk about the work local in terms of launching locally, the history locally, and then how the magic happens in terms of being the voice and the advocate for the child.
Yeah, so Williamson County CASA started in 1993. And again, just like the origins nationally, local programs is when a judge decides for their court, this is important to me. I want to make sure that I know what this child needs, not what everyone else thinks this child needs. So the program in Williamson County started in 1993 by Judge Franks when she realized she wanted a voice for children in her courtroom. So here in Williamson County, we served 410 children last year. And that is every single child that needed an advocate got an advocate in Williamson County. And that service was provided by 90 advocate volunteers throughout the year.
That's awesome. Talk about how the advocates are trained, because there's a lot of training that goes in. And obviously, when you talk about being a voice for the child, you have to get to know the child. And so talk about how it all comes to life.
Yeah, so there is an initial 33-hour training that every advocate has to go through. And so it really runs the gamut of understanding the population that you'll be serving. So these are children who have experienced trauma. So some of the training involves how to interact with a child who has been through a traumatic experience and making sure that those interactions are positive, because the child has been through enough and we don't want to be someone who is re-traumatizing a child. We want to bring them into safety. So some of the training is that, but also some of the training is the function of serving this child in the courtroom and what that looks like. So some of it is learning how to develop a report that you produce to give to the judge in court. And that report is a reflection of what's going on with that child and their experience. So all of this training is very thorough, very intentional to equip our advocates to be successful. But once they go out into the world of advocacy, they're never alone. They always have our staff and our team to support them along the way, to guide them, because if you're in this field for more than a week, you realize that no one case is the same, and that when you're dealing with people, it's always something different. And so there's always something new to learn or a different way to look at things. And so we continue to be supportive of our advocates of learning new skills. And we also provide education along the way. It's not a one and done, and the best for every child going forward. It's kind of a continuation of learning as you go.
What's the length of time, the duration when you're paired up and you're the advocate for the child? What does that look like in terms of kind of walking through with them, being their voice? What does that look like?
Yeah. So we ask when someone decides to become an advocate that they give a minimum of a 2-year commitment, just for that reason, is because many times cases of abuse and neglect are long. They are not resolved in a few weeks or even a few months. And the average length of time that a case takes is approximately a year. But we have several cases that go on for many years before they're fully resolved. So it's really important to us that our advocates serve as the consistent adult in that child's life. Attorneys will come and go, DCS workers will come and go, their family members will come and go. But we want to ensure that the advocate is the one consistent adult for that child for the entire journey until they're in a safe and permanent home.
Without, you obviously don't have to name any names, but kind of share the story of a child and the importance of having the advocate, especially when it comes to, like you're saying, the relational value of being the consistent force. What does that mean to a child?
Yeah, there's too many stories to tell, but a lot of the time what we see is circumstances of alcohol or drug abuse going on in the home, and that makes it to be an unsafe environment for the child. So sometimes there is physical violence, but a lot of the time it's that the parent is unable to care for the child because they're under the influence of some sort of substance. So what is best is if a child can stay with another family member who's safe, but a lot of the time it can mean that the child is removed and placed into foster care. And so that is another challenging situation for a child, to be put in a home that they don't know with people that they don't know. And oftentimes the child will move foster homes several times as well during the course of their case. So again, it's so vitally important for this one adult who's their advocate to be there with them through the whole thing, that they know I can always count on this one person, and they know what's going on, and they've known from the beginning what's been going on with me, and I can kind of lean on them and trust them that they're working in my best interests.
For a volunteer, is it typically one child and really focus in, or do they handle multiple youth at a given time?
Yeah, it can depend. Certainly we'll have circumstances where several children in one family will come into custody with the state at the same time. And so you might have one advocate who's serving multiple children within a family. We've even had circumstances where it was a very large family, upwards of 6 children or more. So sometimes we would put multiple advocates on that case to ensure that every child is getting what they need, the support that they need. And for the most part, each of our advocates only carries one caseload at a time, so they can give it their full attention.
When you look at the overall pervasiveness and the need, what does that look like? Because obviously you mentioned the number of youth served and, thankfully able to meet those needs, but what does it look like in the larger context of how many volunteers in a given year do you need? How, do we need more capacity? What does that look like overall?
Yeah, like you said, we have been fortunate with our community that we have been able to serve 100% of the children who need us. And that is not even close to the case in most areas. So we're really fortunate, but we know better than to stay stagnant and not look to the future. And we all know how rapidly our communities are growing. And so unfortunately, along with that, some of the more challenging experiences for people are also growing. So we know that child abuse and neglect will not magically go away. It will always be something that we have to deal with, and we have to acknowledge that it exists, and we have to be ready for it to grow when a population grows. So we're always looking ahead to continuing to recruit volunteers who are willing to step into this. And so volunteer advocates will always be a need in our community in Williamson County and across the United States.
Go ahead and talk about the ways that we can help, because obviously the volunteerism is a big piece of this, going through the training and everything too, but financial contributions, there's a lot of ways we can help, including events. So talk about the many different ways the community can help.
Yeah. So, of course, funding is always a need for every nonprofit that's ever existed in all of time. But certainly for us to have the solid and skilled staff members that we have to properly support our advocates in their work is really essential. And that's why we're such a successful program, is because we have that in place and continue to look to the community to support us in those efforts. Functionally, the things that we have coming up, of course, end of year campaigns are very important to us as an organization. So we're always looking for support for that, and also to become a monthly donor is wildly important to us. So something consistent, something we can count on, just like we're providing consistency for our children. We would love for the community to show that same consistency to us through their support. But a fun event that we have coming up is April 7th, and it is our Voices for Children event, and it will be held at Greystone Quarry, which if you haven't been there, you need to go. You need to see it at least once. So this is a great time to go out and check out that venue if you've not been before. But again, that's April 7th, and so that will we'll have food, drinks, entertainment, auction, all things that we've been missing, getting the opportunity to do for 2 years now. We're looking forward to seeing our friends and supporters in the community at that event.
I know you also do informational sessions. And so talk about some of the informational sessions.
Yeah, so our next informational session will be on January 14th. And what that looks like is it will be over Zoom. So you don't have to do too much of a commitment to get involved, but that will be a great way for somebody who's interested in what does that really look like? What does being an advocate really look like? And so we'll take kind of a deeper dive into the actual function of advocacy, everything from how often you work with a child, who all you talk to, what's the time commitment, when do I go to court? All of those details, those will be covered in that session. So then you can kind of see if it's a good fit for you, or if it's not a good fit at this season of life, but something you would be interested in the future.
How has this work changed you personally in terms of your outlook and how the community can play a role in something as critical as being a voice for children?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, the way I got involved with this organization was my next door neighbor was serving as a CASA advocate, and she and I would take walks around the neighborhood or talk in the treehouse, and her passion and excitement for what she was doing was contagious. And my eyes were opened through her experience of how vital it was in this community and how real it was too. Like a lot of hardships, if it's not real to you, it's not real. And so since I hadn't had a personal firsthand experience in this field, I didn't know. You don't know what you don't know, right? So I had the privilege of an advocate expressing to me what was going on and opened my eyes to this community. And I'm so thankful to get to be a part of it. We say all the time, it's highest of highs, lowest of lows in this world. You're meeting people in the worst time of their life, but you get to see members of the community be their very best by giving of their time and of their affection and of their care to the most vulnerable population that we have. So it's deeply challenging, but it's also deeply rewarding to get to see our community step up and help.
Yeah. How do you all grade success? Because you can look at a lot of different things. Obviously, as a nonprofit, and being financially sound is one element, but being able to obviously do the matchmaking and have 100% match there. But how do you grade success?
Yeah, so the goal is always to have a child be in a safe and permanent home. And so statistically, we see that if a child has a CASA advocate, they're half as likely to re-enter the juvenile court system again. And we know how vital that is. When you look at childhood trauma and how essential it is to minimize trauma that children experience. So, we can't stop abuse from happening the first time, but we can certainly help prevent it from happening again in the future if we know what's going on with that child and get them into a safer place for the future so then they can go on and thrive. And then, we'll see the success of children going into the future. They're more likely to succeed in school. There's lots of data on the children that we support. If they have that one caring, consistent adult, that they can go on and be really successful into adulthood.
Wrap up with contact information. So website, social media, phone number, where would you direct us to get involved and learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. So our website is Williamson County CASA.org, and our Facebook is Williamson County CASA as well. We're keeping it really easy. And then on Instagram, we are also Williamson County CASA with some spaces in there, but certainly check out our website and you can see links to all of that. And we welcome the conversation. We hope people will join us for that informational session in January, and consider being a voice for a child in their community.
Absolutely. Well, Emily, greatly appreciate all you and your team are doing. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.